Assalamualaikum and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for joining us. I'm Shuhaida Arifin and you're watching World Today. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has called on ASEAN member states to stay united and resilient in the face of new US tariffs. He noted that the tariffs announced by President Donald Trump is not the first challenge to multilateralism, nor will they be the last. Explaining further, he said ASEAN countries should rely on each other as the United States' tariffs spread across the globe. He said this includes strengthening intra-ASEAN cooperation and moving beyond rhetoric to tangible action.
Tariff liberalization within the region is largely complete, but regulatory alignment, cross-border logistics, digital connectivity remain unfinished business. It also means safeguarding and expanding our external linkages. Our dialogue and sectoral partners span 6 continents. Few regional blocs can claim such a network. As chair this year, Malaysia will prioritize the revitalization of strategic platforms such as the ASEAN Plus 3 as mechanisms for economic resilience.
A global trade war touched by US President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs escalated further on Monday as Trump threatened to increase duties on China. Trump's advisors said he would be willing to negotiate with countries that are scrambling to head off tariffs as high as 50% due to take effect on Wednesday. However, Trump himself ruled out discussion with Beijing as he ratcheted up a confrontation with the world's number 2 economy. Trump said he would impose an additional 50% duty on U.S. imports from China on Wednesday if it did not withdraw the 34% tariffs it had imposed on U.S. products last week. Those Chinese tariffs had come in response to 34% reciprocal duties announced by Trump. Chinese-American business owners in Oakland, California spoke out against Trump's tariffs on import from China. The administration imposed a total import tax of 54% on goods from China, which includes an additional 34% on top of an existing 20% tariff, which was announced in March.
And now that because many imports are coming in paying high tariffs, so they will be translating into more higher costs for the wholesaler, the importers, and then it will be trickling down to the retailers. And guess what? Toward the end, it's all consumers are paying for it.
On a related note, the European Commission has offered a 0-for-0 tariff deal to avert a trade war with US President Donald Trump as EU ministers agreed to prioritize negotiations while striking back with 25% tariffs on some US imports. The 27-nation bloc faces 25% import tariffs on steel and aluminium and cars and broader tariffs of 20% from Wednesday for almost all other goods under Trump's trade policy. The Commission proposed its first retaliatory tariffs at 25% on a range of US imports in response to Trump's steel and aluminium tariffs rather than the broader levies. The goods are wide-ranging and including diamonds, eggs, dental floss, sausages and poultry. At a meeting in Luxembourg, ministers overseeing trade said the priority was to launch negotiations to remove Trump's tariffs rather than fight them.
We prefer to have a negotiated solution. The relevant partners, Maroš Šefčovič, our Trade Commissioner, and Secretary of Commerce Latnik, for example, are in very close contacts on that topic. And it is clear that negotiations have to go deep into technical details. So this has to be solved first, and then comes the next step.
EU Trade Chief Maroš Šefčovič said discussions with Washington were at an early stage and he had offered 0-for-0 tariffs for cars and other industrial products, expressing hope that discussions could begin. Samsung Electronics revealed that its television business is expected to be less affected by U.S. tariffs than rivals because most of its TVs sold in North America are produced in Mexico. Samsung said this is because Mexico largely escaped Trump's new 10% global baseline tariff and steeper reciprocal tariffs for many trading partners announced last Wednesday. Still, president of Samsung's visual display business, Yong Seok-woo, said Samsung, the world's top TV maker, will continue to watch the changing U.S. tariff policy, and depending on tariffs, it plans to allocate production accordingly across about 10 production bases around the world.
특히 TV가 많은 이제 매출의 포션을 차지하고 있는데 거의 대부분의 TV는 멕시코에서 생산을 하고 있습니다. 따라서 이번에 발표된 관세의 영향은 경쟁사 대비는 좀 적은 것으로 되어 있으나 아시다시피 관세가 계속해서 변화되고 있기 때문에 실제로 저희가 그런 부분에 대해서 계속해서 워칭을 하고 있습니다.
Samsung is also bracing itself for the impact from U.S. tariffs on its other mainstay businesses, such as memory chips and smartphones, which could face reduced demand. South Korea announced on Monday it will work to lift a U.S. ban on salt imports from the country's largest sea salt farm, disputing findings by the U.S. Customs Agency that forced laborers appeared to be involved in salt production. U.S. Customs and Border Protection issued last week an order to detain products from a Taepyeong salt farm based on information that reasonably indicates the use of forced labor. South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries said on Monday that the U.S. measure took place years after an activist organization petitioned for the order in 2022. The ministry said since violations such as workers being paid inadequately at the salt farm in the southwest of the Korean peninsula came to light by 2021, the ministry has already enforced improvement measures and the products being exported to the United States are not produced by forced labor. Taepyeong Salt Farm said in a statement that past labor issues were related to a former tenant in 2021 who had been forcibly removed from the farm in 2023. Taepyeong said as of 2025, it had signed consignment contracts with 25 tenants who were producing salt in compliance with the relevant labor laws. The U.S. Supreme Court has lifted a lower court order barring the deportation of undocumented migrants using an obscure wartime law in a victory for the President Donald Trump administration. However, the nation's top court also said that migrants subject to deportation under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act must be given an opportunity to legally challenge their removal. The Supreme Court decision will allow the Trump administration to resume deportations for now that had been blocked by a district court judge. Previously, District Judge James Bosberg issued an injunction barring further flights of deportees under the Alien Enemies Act after plane loads of Venezuelan migrants were sent to El Salvador on 15 March. The Supreme Court lifted Bosberg's temporary restraining orders, but mostly on technical grounds related to venue, as the migrants who sued to prevent their removal are in Texas, while the case before Bosberg was heard in Washington. At the same time, the Supreme Court made it clear that migrants subject to deportation under the Act, which has only previously been used during wartime, are entitled to some form of due process. It said the detainees subject to removal orders are entitled to notice and an opportunity to challenge their removal. A major fire broke out in Paris close to a new court complex designed by Renzo Piano, sending smoke across the city and prompting authorities to urge the public to stay away from the zone. The fire at the Siktom recycling plant was right next to Paris' main court complex, whose centerpiece is the glass skyscraper designed by Italian architect Piano and inaugurated in 2018. A thick black cloud could be seen across the French capital as firefighters battled the blaze that ripped through one of the city's biggest recycling plant. The fire brigade said around 60 fire trucks and 200 firefighters were at the scene, adding that there were no victims. Flame lit up the night sky and authorities closed part of the main ring road around Paris to allow access to the burning building for firefighting vehicles. Mayor for the affected 17th arrondissement, Geoffrey Bollac, said the building is completely gutted and destroyed, but all staff inside had been evacuated. He added firefighters arrived very quickly, but the fire happened underground and then spread through the building. According to city authorities, the plant, which started operations in 2019, was designed to handle household waste for nearly 1 million Paris residents. A volcano in the central Philippines erupted early this morning, sending a plume of ash of 4,000 meters into the sky and prompting calls for local school cancellations. Canlaon volcano, one of the 24 active volcanoes in the Southeast Asian nation, erupted in December, prompting the evacuation of surrounding villages. The area around the volcano on the island of Negros was still under evacuation orders when today's eruption occurred. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology said the volcano is producing a voluminous bent plume approximately 4,000 meters tall that is drifting southwest. Rescue official in Negros Occidental Provinces, La Castellana Municipality, Jean Diaz, said the families within the 4 to 6 kilometer permanent danger zone were already evacuated during the previous eruption last December. He added the authorities were recommending the cancellation of classes and work in the municipality. The level 3 alert out of a scale of 5 put in place during December's eruption remain unchanged. Coming up, post-war Gaza plans cannot exclude Palestinians. Thousands of Afghan refugees continued to stream across the Torkham border on Monday after Pakistan intensified its deportation campaign, forcing undocumented Afghans to leave the country, many of whom had lived there for decades. The most significant transfers took place in the Punjab province, where 5,111 Afghan nationals were transported to the transit camps or holding centres across the province for repatriation, including 2,301 children, 1,120 women. From Karachi, over 300 Afghans were deported from Pakistan to their home country. The law enforcement agencies in Rawalpindi Sunday rounded up 736 Afghan nationals, including 140 women and 164 children, are shifted them to the Afghan refugee camp near Golramore. Of the 736 people, 179 were deported to Afghanistan. The security agencies had identified 100,000 Afghans living in over 150 Afghan colonies across Punjab only. Many Afghans expressed dissatisfaction with the sudden implementation of the deportation orders. They said that they sold all their belongings at the throwaway prices and picked up their businesses in haste, which left them with huge losses. In March, Pakistan's Interior Ministry reiterated its directive for all illegal foreigners and Afghan citizen card holders to leave the country by 31st March, warning that deportations would commence from 1st April. The leaders of France, Egypt and Jordan stressed that the Palestinian Authority must head post-war governance in the Gaza Strip. The question of who will rule the Palestinian territory has been one of the main sticking points in efforts to prolong a ceasefire in Gaza that collapsed last month. French President Emmanuel Macron, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah II said the governance, law and order and security in Gaza, as well as in all Palestinian territories, must be sole responsibility of strengthened Palestinian Authority. At their meeting in Cairo, the three leaders called for an immediate return to the ceasefire.
تحقيق الاستقرار والسلام الدائم في الشرق الأوسط سيظل أمراً بعيد المنال طالما ظلت القضية الفلسطينية بدون تسوية عادلة، وطالما ظل الشعب الفلسطيني يواجه ويلات حروب طاحنة تدمر مقوماته وتحرم أجياله القادمة من حقها حتى في الأمل في مستقبل أكثر أمناً واستقراراً.
The three heads of the state also presented a united front against displacement of the population from Gaza. The French presidency said from Cairo, Macron set up a call between the three leaders and US President Donald Trump. The trio underlined the US President the need to immediately re-establish full access for aid delivery and the necessity of creating favorable conditions for a real political horizon. Meanwhile, nearly 400,000 Gaza residents have been displaced in the weeks since Israel resumed military operations in the territory with relentless attacks leading to large-scale civilian casualties. The United Nations Secretary-General spokesman Stefan Dujarric said survivors across Gaza are being displaced repeatedly and forced into an ever-shrinking space where their basic needs just cannot be met. He said overall, the UN estimates that nearly 400,000 people have been displaced yet again since the breakdown of the ceasefire. Much of the Gaza Strip's population of roughly 2.4 million people had already been displaced at least once between 7th October 2023 and the start of the ceasefire in January. In a joint statement, the head of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, World Health Organization, UNICEF and World Food Programme appealed to world leaders to act firmly, urgently and decisively to ensure the basic principles of international humanitarian law are upheld. They added vast numbers of Gazans are trapped, bombed and starved again, while at crossing points, food, medicine, fuel and shelter supplies are piling up and vital equipment is stuck amid an Israeli humanitarian and commercial blockade in its second month. Israeli strike on southern Gaza killed at least one journalist and wounded 9 others yesterday. According to Gaza's Civil Defense Agency, the journalist is one of at least 12 people killed in Israeli strikes across the Palestinian territory yesterday as the war entered its 19th month. Civil Defense spokesman Mahmoud Basal said an airstrike hit the tent used by journalists in the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis, killing at least 2 people. He noted that 9 journalists were injured in the attack. The Hamas government media office said journalist Hilmel al-Faqawi, who worked for a local news agency, was killed in the attack. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry called Faqawi's killing a part of a growing series of crimes targeting journalists directly in a systematic attempt to silence the Palestinian voice and erase the truth. The Palestinian Journalists Protection Center also condemned the attack, saying the deliberate targeting of journalists constitutes a war crime. In central Gaza, Basal said an Israeli airstrike hit 3 houses in Deir al-Balah city and killed at least 7 people. Further north, he said, a strike hit a group of civilians in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood, killing 3 people. Israel resumed intense strikes on Gaza on 18 March, ending a 2-month ceasefire with Hamas. President Donald Trump said the United States is starting direct high-level talks with Iran over its nuclear program on Saturday. Trump said he's hopeful of reaching a deal with Tehran, but warned that Iran would be in great danger if the talks are not successful.
And we're dealing with them directly. You know, a lot of people say, oh, maybe you're going through surrogates or you're not dealing directly, you're dealing through other countries. No, we're dealing with them directly, and maybe a deal is going to be made. That would be great. It'll be really great for Iran, I can tell you that. But hopefully, we're not going to have to get into that. We We are meeting very importantly on Saturday at almost the highest level.
Trump's stunning announcement came a day after Iran dismissed direct negotiations on a new deal to curb the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, calling the idea pointless. Trump issued a stern warning to Tehran, however, saying that if the talks are not successful, he thinks Iran is going to be in great danger because it cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US president pulled out of the last deal in 2018 during his first presidency, and there has been widespread speculation that Israel, possibly with US help, might attack Iranian facilities if no new agreement is reached. President Volodymyr Zelensky said for the first time that Ukrainian forces were operating in Russia's Belgorod region, where Moscow reported attacks in March. Belgorod is regularly the target of Ukrainian air attacks and is close to Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces have been desperately hanging on to the territory since launching a surprise incursion last year. Zelensky said the country's Commander-in-Chief General Alexander Syrsky had reported on Ukrainian forces' presence in both Kursk region and Belgorod region. He added Ukraine continues to conduct active operations in the border areas on the Russia's territory, saying that the war must return to where it came from. It is the first time in more than 3 years since Russia's invasion that Zelensky has explicitly mentioned a Ukrainian presence in Belgorod, a region on the border with Ukraine with a population of about 1.5 million people. The Russian military acknowledged facing Ukrainian land attacks in the region in March at a time when Ukrainian forces were under pressure in Kursk. Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials said the incursion into Kursk and other Russian territory is to divert Russian forces attacking the Ukrainian regions of Sumy and Kharkiv. Up next, Southampton's sacked manager Ivan Juric after Premier League relegation. Despite a string of lackluster performances recently, 2022 men's doubles world champions Aaron Woo-Yik are seen as having the potential to roar back into form at the 2025 Badminton Asia Championships BAC in Ningbo, China. The confidence was expressed by national badminton legend Datuk Razif Siddiq based on the relatively easy path awaiting the 6 seeds at the tournament, which will be held at the Ningbo Olympic Sports Centre Gymnasium until this Sunday. World number 6 pair had previously been hampered by injuries to Aaron, which saw them exit in the first round of the 2 recent tournaments, the 2025 Orleans Master in France and the 2025 All England Championship last month. Aaron Woo-Yik will open their BAC 2025 campaign against an unseeded Japanese pair, Kenya Mitsuhashi Hiroki Okamura, with a head-to-head record favouring the Malaysian 3-0. They are then expected to face a lesser-known Indian pair, Hariharan Amsakuranan, Ruben Kumar Retinasabati, before encountering a real test in the quarterfinals should the third seeds from Indonesia, Fajar Alfian Muhammad Rian Ardianto, progress to that stage. Meanwhile, another national men's doubles pair, Wan Muhammad Arif Shahruddin Wan Junaidi and Yap Roy King, are aiming to reach the quarterfinals of the Badminton Asia Championships. According to Wan Arif, preparations with his partner have gone smoothly as planned, and they hope this will help them to meet their target. The duo, ranked 19th in the world, will open their BAC campaign against Singapore's Wesley Koh and Junsuke Kubo. If they advance to the second round, the Malaysian pair will face the tough challenges as they are likely to meet second seeds Liang Weikeng, Wang Chang of China, who are expected to beat Taiwan's Fan Zhenli and Fang Zhenli in the opening round. Commenting on the absence of India's top pairs, Sawi Sairaj Rankireddy and Chirag Sethi, Wan Arif said it would not make the task of Malaysian player any easier. He said BAC is one of a top-rate tournament and no pairs should be taken lightly. Manager Ivan Juric has left Southampton a day after the team's relegation from the Premier League was confirmed in Sunday's 3-1 loss at Tottenham Hotspur. The club said on Monday that the first team coach Simon Rusk will take over as interim manager. Former Croatia international Juric was appointed in December after Southampton's poor start to the season, but failed to turn things around as the club suffered the earliest relegation in Premier League history with 7 matches to spare. Southampton said in a statement that yesterday they reached an agreement with Juric to end his spell at the club. Juric came to Southampton at a tough time and was tasked with trying to improve the squad in a difficult situation. Unfortunately, the club said it hasn't seen performances progress the way it had hoped. Juric won only 2 of his 16 matches in charge in all competition and picked up 4 points in the league as Southampton sit bottom of the standings with 10 points. Southampton said Rusk had also been the caretaker manager after former boss Russell Martin was sacked on 15 December following a 5-0 thrashing by Spurs at home. Inter Milan trained in Appiano Gentile on Monday ahead of the first leg of their Champions League quarter-final against Bayern Munich. The Serie A leaders will head to Germany for Tuesday night's match, hoping to maintain their rock-solid defensive record, which has seen them concede just 2 goals in 10 matches in the competition so far. League leaders in Italy and also contesting in the Italian Cup semi-finals with AC Milan, Inter have made no secret of their ambitions to emulate their best ever season of 2009-2010 when a star-studded team beat Bayern in Madrid thanks to a Diego Milito brace after already securing the 2 domestic honours. Another Argentina striker in Lautaro Martinez has been the most bullish about Inter's chances, the captain saying that he believes the Italians can pull off what would be a near miracle ahead of the first leg of their quarter-final with Bayern. Inter are the most recent Italian team to win the Champions League and were unfortunate to lose the 2023 final to Manchester City, but there's no denying that Serie A has lost the luster of yesteryear in the continent's elite club competition. Bayern Munich, meanwhile, will be missing several key players in Tuesday's clash at home to Inter Milan, but manager Vincent Kompany has complete faith in those that are available. Already without goalkeeper Manuel Neuer, defenders Hiroki Ito, Alphonso Davies and Dayot Upamecano, and forward Kingsley Coman, Kompany lost midfield Jamal Musiala to a thigh injury in Friday's 3-1 Bundesliga win over Augsburg. Kompany was giving little away when asked if Thomas Müller could be given a starting role, with Musiala ruled out. Fan favourite Müller announced on Saturday that he will leave Bayern at the end of the season after the club did not offer the 35-year-old a new contract, but Kompany's focus is on the challenge ahead. Kompany also said that his side were not looking for excuses, adding that crisis would bring the team together to overcome this as a group. Alright, so that concludes today's edition of World Today. In our top story, Trump threatens China with additional 50% tariffs. Till then, I'm Shuhaida Arifin from River to the Sea. Palestine will be free. Thank you for watching.